So welcome to this recorded talk about addressing lock-in into resource-intensive lifestyles and the role that future studies / anticipation and design might play in this. This is a work-in-progress presentation, so I look forward to discussing the project and theoretic foundations with you later. The talk has three main parts, and I cut it up in two videos. The first part and first video are about how I'm currently conceptualizing the challenge of lock-in using social practice theory. In the second part, I present the results of a study I conducted last summer on the future of summer comfort, which is founded in these ideas around lock-in. In this second video, I close with a more open part with some links of this work to teaching in industrial design. So our ways of living, as we know, are impacting the planet in a way that is wearing it out for future generations. There is great diversity in the level of resource intensity of these lifestyles. So how to address this challenge? Is it by focusing on lifestyles? In my work, I do not focus on lifestyles, nor on behaviors, consumers or users, but on designers, and to be more precise, industrial designers. Why? I do this because of the role they have in shaping everyday practices and thereby the resource intensity of everyday life. Industrial designers, along with marketeers and many other stakeholders, are trained to insert new technological capabilities into everyday life, and they do this with success. In a 2018 report, the European Environmental Agency found that half of the efficiency gains achieved through technological innovation in the household sector were actually offset by the increasing number of electrical appliances, as well as by larger homes. Even though designers are part of a much bigger system and cannot easily change their practices, they happen to be where I lie my focus. I do this because of their contributions to the increasing resource intensity of everyday life, but also because of their potential to imagine and materialize different, less resource-intensive forms of good living. My research focuses on developing methods and tools for designers towards this potential and away from ratcheting consumption. This begins by better understanding the role of designers in creating lock-in, designers and technologies. So I developed a modification of social practice theory that aims to better account for the role of technologies and their designers in how practices change, and this is called co-performance. I take some time now to introduce it using laundering as an example. Even though many of you are already familiar with social practice theories, I introduce my particular interpretation in order to open it up for critique in the discussion. So social practice theory is a theory from sociology that centralizes practices in its understanding of social phenomena. A practice is by requisite defined as a routinized type of behavior. Examples often used are cooking, cleaning, parenting, driving, and so on. All human activity can be seen as the performance of one or more practices. There are a number of concepts in the theories of practice that I draw on, mainly by Schatzky, Shove, and Reckwitz, that I find particularly useful in understanding the role of technologies and designers in social change. One is the recursive relation between practices entity and practices performance, and the second is the concept of practices as constellations of elements. The practices entity can be seen as a socially shared idea of appropriate and inappropriate conduct. Are my clothes sufficiently clean? This difference between appropriate and inappropriate is not black and white. The social practice frames what's generally considered appropriate, but eventually appropriateness is judged in the situated performance. A sports game, a wedding, a quiet night in all have different requirements for appropriate dressing and cleanliness. The performance is the actual observable behavior, the doing. For example, you're now performing the practice of watching a recorded talk. This is different from watching a live talk with a different set of expectations of doing this properly. You can, for example, pause whenever you want. By doing it, you reproduce this idea. On a broader scale, in situations like this failed talk, ideas of appropriate performance are reinterpreted in the moment. If repeated many times, a reinterpretation, such as recording and discussing later for an academic presentation, could become normal and the shape of the practice's entity shifts, as it already has for many practices due to the COVID situation, actually. In the strand of practice theory developed by Chauve, social practices are viewed as constellations of elements grouped as meaning, skills, and stuff. Laundering, for example, involves materials such as water, detergent, garments, and washing machines. Meanings such as cleanliness and appropriate appearance, and skills of compiling a load and removing dirt from fabrics. Chauve and others view humans as the integrators of these elements in situated performances. Automated technologies, like the washing machine, are considered part of the stuff, with links to skills and meanings, but they do not take the same position as humans. So putting these two together, as done in the next slide, depicts how the role of humans in shaping everyday life is viewed in social practice theory, or at least my interpretation of it. Humans perform practices by integrating elements in ways that are, as framed by the social practice, appropriate for the situation at hand. The human performers in this model not only shape the performance in the moment by integrating elements in a certain way, but also performances beyond it because they help shape the social practice, which in turn shapes subsequent performances. So this effect becomes visible at larger timescales. For example, doing the laundry has over time, through millions of smaller and larger reinterpretations of how to appropriately care for one's textiles, changed from the elaborate process of hand washing, wringing, and drying to pushing a button on the washing machine. But has all that work and the elements integrated into it really disappeared? No. But while hand washing can be described in detail in the practice theory framework, the exact actions of the washing machine risk becoming obscured. When we think about it, automated artifacts, like washing machines, can, with some stretching, be considered to perform practices. They integrate elements in unique ways, can be considered to perform routinized behaviors, and have body minds. So here is a difference between washing machines and chairs. So a washing machine, due to its equipment with sensors, actuators, and computing power, has the capability to act in response to specific situations, which is something that a chair, for example, cannot do. There is a limit here, though, because they cannot, at least in my view, pursue ends. Artifacts don't have intentionality. So in other words, machine washing is only meaningful because people pursue such ends as clean garments, tidy households, convenience, easy lives, and representative appearances. Hence the term co-performance and not artificial performance in itself. So co-performance is a modification of practice theory that lifts automated technologies out of the category of passive stuff and places them next to humans as co-performers of practices. As such, co-performance distributes the shaping of everyday life between human and artificial performers. So, as you see here. I will now briefly illustrate some insights this might render by elaborating on the example of laundering. For understanding everyday practices, co-performance implies including the actions of both the human and the washing machine, the automated artifact, in the social analysis of laundering. Users are in control of how they use their devices and are free to deviate from intended uses, but they don't fully control their appliances. Because although washing machines do nothing without being switched on, once running, they automatically decide how to proceed. And while running, they make situated judgments and decisions. This ad for the new English electric liberator illustrates this point. So what is considered a right temperature or right length of time given a certain load is materialized into the machine in the design process. Part of the rationale for the appropriate performance can therefore only be found in this design process. So what is the right temperature? What is the right length of time? So what is right? So what also happens here is that complex social judgments are moved outside of the situated performance into the situation of the design process. And I will get back to this later. What a co-performance perspective implies for understanding practice configurations is to look at differences in capabilities between humans and machines. So why washing machines do what they do and why the work of laundering is divided in the way it is can in part be explained in terms of differences in capabilities between human body minds and artificial body minds. So humans provide, for example, the washing machine with a load because they're good at handling things, moving around the house, judging levels of dirtiness, while the washing machine does the task of spinning the drum around for 1400 rounds per minute, which is something that humans cannot do. So I'll continue on this topic as I move to the challenge of understanding social change that I started with. So when looking at change over time with a lens of co-performance, the process of delegation, as introduced by Latour, is highlighted. What it adds here, though, is the particular capability of artificial body minds to embody practice-specific, accumulated learning as a category of artifact. So not as individual, but as a category of artifacts. Other than humans, artifacts as this category can radically change shape over different generations. They have an evolutionary advantage here. So while early washing machines were able to simply mix garments with soap and water, their successors are now capable of washing and drying a load automatically. We can say that in a certain way, artifacts learn faster than humans. And over time, the tasks they take on accumulate. This is home automation. So this quote from another 1950s washing machine commercial illustrates that in this process of automation, the practice is transformed. Standards and expectations change. But while the machine developers might argue that easy does it better, I would say that it just does it differently. Because there are certain things that easy cannot do, such as distinguishing between different garments in a load based on their social significance in the household. So for example, treating that favorite new sweater differently than the old apron. The loss of this skill in laundering has been a price paid in automation, which can be argued to have contributed to shorter lifespans for garments. Of course, the notion that automation has downsides is not new, but co-performance now specifies automation as a process of redefining appropriate performance to fit the capabilities of artificial body minds. So we have come to care less about the separate treatment of different garments for the advantage of having this laundry done for us by a machine. This process creates dependence on artificial capabilities that cannot easily be reversed. And this is, for me, a definition or specification of lock-in. So moving from historic change in laundering, this theoretic positioning formed the basis for my project on anticipating lock-in in the context of future summer comfort. And I will go deeper into that in the second part of this presentation.